The packed auditorium fell silent as Commander Wilson froze mid-speech, staring at the old black janitor mopping near the exit. "Nighthawk," he whispered into the microphone. Marcus stopped, mop suspended. 40 years of secrets shattered in an instant. The most decorated ghost in American covert operations had finally been found. Before we dive into this extraordinary story of heroism and injustice, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. If this tale of a forgotten American hero resonates with you, hit that like button and subscribe to hear more untold stories of courage that history tried to erase. Now let's discover how a man who served his country in the shadows finally stepped into the light he deserved. Marcus Johnson woke at precisely 5:30 every morning, a habit formed during decades of military discipline that his 67-year-old body refused to abandon. His modest one-bedroom apartment in East Baltimore was meticulously organized, everything in its place, nothing wasted. The morning routine never varied. 20 push-ups, a quick shower, plain oatmeal with a sliced banana, and black coffee in a chipped mug that read, "World's Best Grandpa," though Marcus had no grandchildren, no children at all. By 6:15, he was walking the 12 blocks to Westridge Manufacturing Plant, where he had worked as a janitor for nearly 15 years. The early morning streets were quiet, and Marcus preferred it that way. Invisibility had become his armor, his protection, his way of navigating a world that had taught him harsh lessons about standing out. The manufacturing plant produced precision parts for various industries, recently securing a lucrative defense contract that had management strutting around like peacocks. For Marcus, it meant more floors to mop, more trash to collect, more toilets to scrub. As he swiped his ID card at the employee entrance, he nodded politely to the security guard who barely acknowledged him. Inside, he changed into his grey uniform in the small janitorial closet that doubled as a break room for the cleaning staff. "Morning, old-timer," called Derek, a 20-something janitor who treated Marcus with the dismissive respect reserved for the elderly. "Yes, sir, good morning," Marcus replied softly. Eyes down, the deferential posture he had perfected in 1960s Alabama, where he learned that black boys who looked white men in the eye often didn't live to become black men. Memories of his childhood flashed unbidden, his father being called boy by men half his age, his mother working in white homes for pennies, the segregated water fountains, schools, restaurants. How little had changed in some ways, he thought, as he pushed his cleaning cart toward the administrative wing. The morning shift managers and office workers streamed in around 8, none sparing a glance for the old janitor diligently polishing the brass railings. Marcus had mastered the art of working without being seen, a ghost moving through spaces, leaving only cleanliness as evidence of his passing. He heard them before he saw them, a group of young white workers from the machine shop floor. "Yes, sir, no, sir, 3 bags full, sir," one mocked in an exaggerated servile tone as Marcus passed. The others snickered. Marcus kept his eyes on his work, pretending not to hear. He had learned long ago that reaction was what they wanted, and he would not give them the satisfaction. Around midday, Harrison Reed, the plant manager, approached Marcus as he was cleaning the windows in the conference room. Reed was 42, with the smug confidence of a man who believed his position was earned solely through merit, rather than the advantages of his skin color and family connections. "Johnson, when you're done here, there's a mess in the men's room on the production floor. Someone got sick. Take care of it right away," Reed commanded without looking at Marcus, as if speaking to the air. "Yes, sir, Mr. Reed," Marcus responded automatically. Reed paused, irritation crossing his features. "And make sure you're not visible during the tour tomorrow. We have important military personnel coming to discuss the new contract. Don't need them seeing—" Reed gestured vaguely at Marcus, leaving the implication hanging. The plant manager walked away without waiting for a response. Marcus gripped the window cleaner bottle tightly, his knuckles whitening momentarily, before he forced himself to relax. 40 years ago he would have... But no, that was another life, another man. Now he was just an old janitor, invisible, forgettable. That evening, the facility buzzed with preparation for the next day's important visit. Marcus deliberately worked late, ensuring his cleaning duties would be complete before the military delegation arrived in the morning. As he mopped the hallway outside the executive offices, a group of men in Navy uniforms emerged from a preliminary meeting. Marcus kept his head down, focusing on the monotonous back-and-forth motion of his mop. "We'll continue the tour at 0900 tomorrow," said a voice that made Marcus's hand falter imperceptibly. Something in the cadence, the authoritative tone, triggered a response deep in his muscle memory. Marcus risked a glance. The officer speaking was Commander James Wilson, tall and imposing in his dress uniform. For a fraction of a second, their eyes met. Wilson paused mid-sentence, a flicker of confusion crossing his face. Marcus quickly looked away, resuming his mopping with renewed vigor. The moment passed, and the Navy personnel continued toward the exit. Marcus waited until the sound of their footsteps faded, before leaning heavily on his mop, his heart hammering in his chest. That night, driving home in his 15-year-old Toyota that he maintained with military precision, Marcus's hands trembled, slightly on the steering wheel. He took 3 wrong turns, deliberately creating a circuitous route home, checking his rearview mirror frequently. Old habits. Inside his apartment, Marcus went straight to the refrigerator. Not to open it, but to slide it carefully away from the wall, revealing a small panel that would be invisible to anyone not looking for it. Behind the panel was a shallow cavity containing a metal box roughly the size of a thick paperback book. He didn't open it. He never did. Just knowing it was there, secure, undisturbed, was enough. Marcus replaced the panel and pushed the refrigerator back into position. On his small television, a documentary about Navy SEALs played, the narrator dramatically recounting operations that had been declassified. In April 1977, SEAL Team 6 conducted a rescue operation in the Gulf of Guinea. Marcus shook his head slightly. "March," he whispered to the empty room. "It was March, and it wasn't 6, it was a joint task force." The neighborhood kids called him Mr. Marcus and thought of him as a harmless old man who sometimes handed out butterscotch candies. The adults nodded respectfully, but knew little about him beyond his quiet demeanor and impeccable lawn. Once a month, Marcus would sit in the back row during veterans events at the local VFW hall. He never claimed to be a veteran himself, never wore a service cap or jacket. He just listened, occasionally closing his eyes as if dozing, but missing nothing. No one questioned his presence. After all, many civilians attended to show respect. No one suspected that the quiet old janitor had once moved through jungles and deserts like a shadow, that his hands had saved lives and taken them with equal efficiency, that the name Nighthawk had once been whispered with awe and fear in certain circles. Those days were gone, buried under classified files and redacted reports. Marcus Johnson had disappeared into the anonymity of an ordinary life, carrying extraordinary secrets. But secrets, like bodies, don't always stay buried. Commander James Wilson couldn't shake the feeling that had struck him in that brief moment of eye contact with the elderly janitor. There was something in the man's posture, in the way he held himself despite the subservient task, something that triggered Wilson's instincts, honed through years of special operations training. Back at the naval base, Wilson found himself pulling up classified archives, searching for something he couldn't quite articulate. "What exactly are you looking for, Commander?" Captain Lawrence asked, finding Wilson still at the computer terminal. Well after hours. Wilson hesitated. "Sir, does the code name Nighthawk mean anything to you?" The change in Lawrence's expression was subtle but unmistakable. "Where did you hear that name?" Wilson explained about the janitor at the manufacturing plant, the strange sense of recognition. Lawrence's face hardened. "Commander, that program never existed, and that man never served. I would advise you to focus on our current operations, rather than chasing ghosts." The warning was clear, but it only intensified Wilson's curiosity. That night, Wilson recalled stories his father, a retired SEAL, had told him years ago. Tales of a legendary operative who moved through hostile territory like he was made of smoke, who could infiltrate locations deemed impenetrable, who had saved more fellow soldiers than anyone in the program's history. His father had only whispered the code name once, Nighthawk. "Some say he wasn't real," his father had said. "Others say the brass couldn't handle that their best operator was a black man, so they buried his records." The next day, instead of returning to the base after the plant tour, Wilson drove to the local VFW hall. The bartender, a Vietnam veteran with a prosthetic leg, was wiping glasses when Wilson approached. "I'm looking for information about an older black gentleman who sometimes attends events here. Doesn't say much, sits in the back." The bartender nodded in recognition. "You mean Marcus Johnson. Comes in once a month or so." "Just some old factory worker who likes military stories, far as I know." "Why are you asking?" Wilson chose his words carefully. "Just thought I recognized him. He ever mentioned serving?" The bartender shook his head. "Nah, never claimed to be military. Some of the guys think he might have been. Way he carries himself sometimes, but he never said so." Wilson thanked him and left, more intrigued than ever. For the next week, Wilson followed Marcus discreetly after his shifts at the plant. He observed the old man's routines, how he varied his routes home, how he always sat with his back to the wall in the diner where he sometimes ate dinner, how his eyes constantly scanned his surroundings, cataloguing threats and exits. These weren't the habits of a simple janitor. They were the ingrained behaviors of someone who had operated in hostile territory for years. On the 7th day of surveillance, Marcus suddenly vanished during his walk home. Wilson had been maintaining what he thought was a safe distance, but somehow the old man had spotted the tail and employed evasive maneuvers that confirmed Wilson's suspicions. This was no ordinary factory worker. The following Monday, Wilson observed from his car as Marcus arrived at work. The plant manager, Reed, intercepted Marcus at the entrance, his body language aggressive and demeaning. "You think you can just take a day off without proper notice, Johnson? We've got standards. Here, I've got 3 applicants who would jump at your position, and they're younger, stronger, and more reliable than you." Wilson couldn't hear Marcus's response, but his body language was deferential, almost submissive. Reed continued, "That's the problem with you people, always thinking the rules don't apply. One more unauthorized absence and you're done, understand?" A younger black employee passing by, whose name tag read Darius, stopped at this exchange. "Mr. Reed, Marcus hasn't missed a day in 5 years. His sister was in the hospital." Reed turned his ire on Darius. "This doesn't concern you, Williams, unless you want your evaluation affected next month." Marcus straightened almost imperceptibly, and for a fleeting moment, Wilson saw something change in the old man's demeanor. His eyes hardened, his shoulders squared, and an unmistakable air of command presence emanated from him. Reed took an involuntary step back. Then, as quickly as it appeared, the transformation vanished, and Marcus was once again the deferential janitor, eyes downcast. "Won't happen again, Mr. Reed," he murmured. The incident only reinforced Wilson's conviction. That momentary transformation wasn't something that could be faked or learned. It was the ingrained authority of someone who had led men in life or death situations. Later that day, Wilson received a phone call from his commanding officer. "Wilson, report to my office immediately." When he arrived, 2 men in civilian clothes were waiting alongside Captain Lawrence. They introduced themselves as Department of Defense officials, but offered no names or identification. "Commander Wilson," the taller one began, "it has come to our attention that you're making inquiries about a program that officially never existed. This stops now." "With all due respect," Wilson replied, "if I've recognized a decorated veteran who was denied recognition due to his race, isn't that something that should be addressed?" The second man stepped forward. "This is a matter of national security, Commander. Drop it or face court-martial for unauthorized access to classified materials. Is that clear?" Wilson was forced to acknowledge the order, but his mind was already formulating a plan. The next morning, a notice circulated through the base announcing a memorial ceremony for veterans of classified operations in Southeast Asia. Wilson saw his opportunity. If he couldn't investigate through official channels, perhaps he could force the truth into the open another way. Have you ever wondered what it feels like to be erased from history? To risk everything for your country, only to be told you never existed? This was the reality for Marcus Johnson, whose remarkable story began in 1975 when a 22-year-old Marcus was approached by a plain-clothed military recruiter on his college campus. "We're looking for men with your specific attributes," the recruiter had said, avoiding the word black, though the implication was clear. Marcus, the son of a Korean War veteran who had returned to segregated Alabama, understood what was being offered, a chance to serve when many doors remained closed to him. The training was brutal, designed to break most candidates. White officers made no attempt to hide their skepticism about a black operative's capabilities. "Johnson won't last a week," Marcus overheard one instructor say. "These people don't have the discipline for spec ops." Marcus not only survived but excelled, outperforming every metric, breaking course records in marksmanship, land navigation, and underwater endurance. Yet when commendations were handed out, his name was conspicuously absent. His first mission came sooner than expected. A hastily assembled unit was dispatched to Cambodia, officially to advise, but in reality to extract an intelligence asset. When their position was compromised, it was Marcus who created the diversion that allowed the team to reach the extraction point, personally carrying the wounded commanding officer the last mile to the helicopter. Back at base, the mission report described exemplary leadership by Lieutenant Thomas Bradford. Marcus's name appeared only as supporting personnel. This pattern would repeat throughout his career. Marcus was consistently assigned as point man on the most dangerous operations, the expendable position. Yet time after time, he would return with mission accomplished and team intact, earning the grudging respect of fellow operators, while command structure systematically erased his contributions. Among those who served with him, the legend of Nighthawk grew. Stories circulated of impossible infiltrations, of enemy positions neutralized without a sound, of wounded men carried miles through hostile territory. Yet official records minimized his role or omitted his presence entirely. "Keep your head down and do your job," his first commander had advised. "Men like us don't get parades, Johnson." By men like us, Marcus understood he meant black operatives. For 15 years, Marcus served in shadows, deployed to Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, Angola, Nicaragua, and a dozen other hotspots that the American public never knew about. Then came the mission in 1991, a classified operation in Iraq that went catastrophically wrong. Bad intelligence, inadequate support, and command decisions that seemed designed for failure. Despite the odds, Marcus completed the primary objective and managed to extract most of his team. 3 men were lost. Upon return, Marcus found himself facing a review board. "Your actions deviated from the mission parameters," the senior officer stated. Those deviations resulted in casualties. No mention was made of the flawed intelligence, the lack of promised air support, the impossible timeline. Marcus was made the scapegoat for a mission that higher-ups needed to bury. His honorable discharge papers showed only 6 years of service in administrative roles, his actual operations redacted into oblivion. The medals he had earned were never awarded. The men he had saved were sworn to secrecy. Nighthawk officially never existed. Do you believe a country should acknowledge the heroes it creates, regardless of their skin color? Comment number 1. If you think Marcus deserved recognition for his sacrifice, or number 2, if you think classified operations should remain buried, regardless of the injustice to individual soldiers. What happens when a government erases your service record but can't erase the skills and memories you carry? Like and subscribe to find out, as Marcus receives a warning that his cover as an ordinary janitor might be compromised. Present day. Marcus was checking the mailbox outside his apartment building when his cell phone rang. The number was blocked. "Stay invisible, Nighthawk," a vaguely familiar voice said. "They're looking again." The line went dead before Marcus could respond. That evening, Marcus noticed a black SUV parked across from his building, 2 men in suits pretending to read newspapers. Another day, another time, he might have slipped away, disappeared into the network of former operators who looked after their own. But he was 67 now, tired of running, tired of hiding. Whatever was coming, perhaps it was time to face it. The next morning, as Marcus walked to work, he realized with certainty that the carefully constructed anonymity of his post-service life was beginning to unravel. The question was why now, after all these years? The annual military appreciation ceremony at Westridge Manufacturing had always been a perfunctory affair, an opportunity for management to bolster the company's patriotic image while courting defense contracts. This year, with the new naval contract secured, the event took on greater significance. Local politicians, military officers, and media were all invited to tour the facility and attend the ceremony in the main auditorium. For Marcus, it meant another day of invisibility. "Johnson, I want every floor spotless," plant manager Reed instructed. "And during the ceremony, I need you working the West Wing. Keep out of sight of our guests." The underlying message was clear. An elderly black janitor wasn't the image Westridge wanted to project to distinguished visitors. Marcus nodded his acquiescence, the familiar mask of subservience firmly in place. "Yes, sir, Mr. Reed." As military personnel began arriving, Marcus diligently mopped floors in the far wing of the building away from the ceremony. He could hear the muffled sounds of the public address system as speeches began in the auditorium. He had no intention of attending, no desire to revisit a world that had used and discarded him. But as he worked, a young employee approached him. It was Darius Williams, the production line worker who had defended him days earlier. "Marcus, you should come to the ceremony," Darius said, excitement in his voice. "The Navy commander is talking about special operations history. Thought you might be interested, being a military buff and all." Marcus politely declined, but Darius was insistent. "Come on, just for a few minutes. Reed's too busy kissing up to the brass to notice." Something in the young man's enthusiasm broke through Marcus's resistance. He followed Darius to the back of the packed auditorium, standing near the exit with his mop, ready to resume the pretense of working if Reed noticed him. Commander Wilson was at the podium, his dress uniform immaculate, his voice carrying authority through the space. "Today, as we celebrate the partnership between Westridge Manufacturing and the United States Navy, I want to share a piece of military history that has remained classified for too long." Marcus felt a prickle of unease. Wilson continued, "In the shadowy world of special operations, there are men whose names never appear in history books, whose medals are never pinned to their chests, whose sacrifices remain unacknowledged. One such operator worked under the code name Nighthawk." The mop handle slipped from Marcus's suddenly numb fingers, clattering loudly on the polished floor. Several heads turned, including Wilson's. Their eyes met across the crowded room. Nighthawk conducted over 70 high-risk operations between 1975 and 1991. Wilson continued, never breaking eye contact with Marcus. "He saved the lives of 38 American servicemen, including my father." A murmur ran through the crowd. Two men in dark suits at the side of the room began moving toward Wilson. "Though officially this operator doesn't exist. His records were redacted, his service erased, but he exists. In fact," Wilson pointed directly at Marcus, "he's standing right there." The auditorium erupted in confusion. Smartphones were raised, capturing the moment. The men in suits reached the stage, one grabbing the microphone while the other spoke urgently into Wilson's ear. Marcus remained frozen. Decades of careful anonymity shattered in an instant. His first instinct was to run, to disappear into the crowd, to become a ghost again. But his feet wouldn't move. Plant manager Reed pushed through the crowd toward Marcus, his face a mask of confusion and disbelief. "Johnson, what is this about?" Before Marcus could respond, reporters were surrounding him, questions flying from all directions. "Were you really a special operator? Why was your service record erased? Is it true you were denied recognition because of racial discrimination?" The world Marcus had carefully built was collapsing around him. In the chaos, Darius appeared at his side. "This way," he said quietly, guiding Marcus toward a service exit. They slipped out as security attempted to restore order in the auditorium. Outside, Darius led Marcus to his car. "I don't know what's happening," the young man said, "but I figure you might need to get out of here." Marcus nodded gratefully, his mind racing. By the time Marcus reached his apartment, the story was breaking across social media. Smartphone videos of Wilson's revelation had gone viral, News vans were already parked outside his building. Marcus slipped in through the service entrance, taking the stairs to avoid being seen. Inside his apartment, he immediately sensed something wrong. The furniture was slightly out of position. The refrigerator had been moved and carefully replaced, but not to its exact original position. The hidden compartment behind it had been discovered and opened. The metal box containing the only tangible proof of his service, unofficial mission logs, photographs, a single bullet casing from his first operation, was gone. Marcus sat heavily on his worn sofa, the weight of 67 years suddenly pressing down on him. After decades of invisibility, he was exposed, vulnerable. And now, without his hidden insurance policy, he had no way to prove Wilson's claims. The phone rang, his landline, a number few people had. Marcus answered cautiously. "They'll try to discredit you," said the same voice that had warned him earlier. "They'll say you're delusional, that you fabricated everything. You need to disappear again." "I'm too old to run," Marcus replied. "Who is this?" "Someone who was there, Baghdad 91. The caller hung up. Marcus knew what he had to do. It was time to activate protocols he hadn't used in decades to reach out to ghosts from his past. If the government was going to deny his existence, he would need allies who remembered the truth. Marcus packed a small bag with essentials, habit making him efficient and thorough. As he prepared to leave, he glanced at the small television in his living room, now showing aerial footage of his apartment building with the caption, "Alleged Black Special Operator at Center of Military Controversy." The anchor was saying, "The Pentagon has issued a statement denying Commander Wilson's claims and announcing his immediate suspension pending investigation." Marcus switched off the TV. The invisibility that had been his prison for decades was now stripped away. If he couldn't hide, he would have to fight. One last mission to reclaim his truth. The safe house in West Baltimore hadn't changed much in 25 years. The peeling paint on the narrow row house might have been refreshed once or twice. The security cameras were newer and more discreet, but Marcus knew the location remained active. He approached from the alley, using the coded knock he had learned decades ago, hoping the protocol hadn't changed. The door opened to reveal an older black man, hair gone silver, face weathered but eyes sharp and assessing. For a moment neither spoke. Then recognition dawned. "Marcus Johnson," the man said quietly. "Or should I say Nighthawk? Never thought I'd see your ghost again." "Hello, Elijah," Marcus replied. "Sorry to drop in unannounced. Things have gotten complicated." Elijah Washington had been one of the few other black operatives in the program, codenamed Whisper, for his ability to extract information from the most reluctant sources without leaving a mark. Now he ushered Marcus inside, checking the street before securing multiple locks. The interior was surprisingly luxurious, at odds with the building's exterior. "Did well for yourself," Marcus observed. Elijah's laugh was without humor. "Investment. Banking after I got out. Turns out the skills transfer. Reading people, calculating risk, staying one step ahead. Plus, white folks love having a token black executive to showcase." He gestured Marcus to a leather armchair. "Saw you on the news. Quite the coming out party." Over the next hour, Marcus explained the situation. Commander Wilson's recognition, the media frenzy, the stolen proof of his service. Elijah listened without interruption, occasionally making notes on a sleek tablet. "They used us because we were expendable," Elijah said when Marcus finished. "Black operators for deniable operations. If we succeeded, others took credit. If we failed or were captured, we officially never existed. No rescue, no acknowledgement, no embarrassing questions." He poured 2 glasses of expensive bourbon. "You weren't the only one they erased, you know. There were 7 of us total. Mitchell died in Angola in '83. Reynolds took his own life in '95. Carter's in a VA hospital with PTSD they refused to acknowledge came from service. Jenkins and Wilson disappeared completely." "And Taylor?" Marcus asked, remembering the youngest of their cohort. "Humanitarian work in Sudan? Only one who seemed to find peace." Elijah's phone buzzed. He checked the screen, frowning. "Government types at my office, asking questions. They move fast." Marcus stared into his untouched bourbon. "I never wanted this, Elijah. All these years I just wanted to be left alone." "Too late for that now," Elijah replied. "Question is, what do you want to happen next?" Before Marcus could answer, the television in the corner automatically activated, security protocols alerting them to breaking news. Commander Wilson was on screen, facing reporters outside the naval base. "I've been placed on administrative leave pending investigation," he was saying, "but I stand by every word. Marcus Johnson served this country with extraordinary courage and was denied recognition solely because of the color of his skin. This systematic erasure of black excellence from military history must end." The broadcast cut to a Pentagon spokesperson. "Commander Wilson's claims are unfounded. While we acknowledge historical inequities in our armed forces, we categorically deny the existence of any program matching his description." The individual he identified as Nighthawk served briefly in an administrative capacity and was honorably discharged. "Any suggestion of classified operations is fantasy." Elijah muted the television. "They're following the playbook. Discredit, deny, deflect. Next, they'll suggest you're mentally unstable, a fantasist seeking attention." "Why now?" Marcus wondered. Aloud, "Why is Wilson doing this after all these years?" "His father," Elijah said, pulling up information on his tablet. "General Andrew Wilson. Served with SEAL Team 2 in the 70s. Recently diagnosed with terminal cancer. Must be trying to set the record straight before he dies." The news continued silently on the screen, showing footage of Darius Williams being interviewed outside the manufacturing plant. Elijah unmuted briefly. "Known Marcus for 3 years," Darius was saying. "He's the most humble, hard-working man I've ever met. If Commander Wilson says he's a hero, I believe it." The camera panned to show plant manager Reed pushing his way to the microphone. "Westridge Manufacturing has always valued our veterans. I personally always knew there was something special about Marcus. His work ethic, his attention to detail." Elijah snorted in disgust and muted the television again. "Hypocritical bastard. Bet he was the first to treat you like dirt." Marcus nodded absently, his mind elsewhere. "We need to contact the others," he said finally. "Taylor in Sudan, Carter in the VA hospital. Anyone still alive who was there?" "To what end?" Elijah asked. "It's your word against the entire military establishment." "Not just mine," Marcus replied, "and not just words." He pulled out his phone, showing Elijah a decades-old photo he'd kept digitized and encrypted. "Remember Operation Stillwater, 84? We documented everything because we didn't trust command to acknowledge the mission if it succeeded." Understanding dawned on Elijah's face. "The insurance policy. We all kept something, didn't we? I've got the mission logs from Nicaragua. Taylor kept radio transcripts from Angola." "They took my physical evidence," Marcus said, "but they don't know about the backups. We need to pool what we have." As they began making secure calls to former teammates, Marcus's phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. It was Darius. "Media saying you fabricated everything. But I found something. Old newspaper from 1977. Has photo of military. Ceremony. Man in background looks exactly like you, but uniform and name tag edited out. Not the only one. Been collecting these for years, military history buff. Want to see?" Marcus showed the message to Elijah, who whistled softly. Kids got good eyes. The redaction wasn't always digital back then. Physical photos could be altered, but newspapers archived around the country might have originals. As night fell, Marcus learned that his story had become a flashpoint for discussions about racial discrimination in the military. Veterans groups were divided, some supporting the Pentagon's denials, others demanding investigation. Civil rights organizations were calling for congressional hearings, and through it all the government maintained its position. Nighthawk never existed. The next morning, a black sedan with government plates parked outside Elijah's safe house. 2 men in suits approached the door but didn't knock. "Just letting you know they're watching," Elijah observed from behind a curtain, "making sure you see them." Hours later, Marcus received a call from a blocked number. Her cultured voice identified himself as representing the Department of Defense. "Mr. Johnson, we'd like to resolve this situation quietly. We're prepared to offer you full recognition of your administrative service, an enhanced pension package, and financial compensation. In return, we ask for your public statement clarifying Commander Wilson's misunderstanding." "You mean denying the truth," Marcus replied. "Acknowledging that operational details remain classified," the voice corrected, smoothly. "This offer expires in 24 hours. After the call, Elijah looked at Marcus expectantly. "They're scared," Marcus said, "which means we have leverage." "Or they're setting you up," Elijah countered. "Classic containment strategy. Offer a small victory to prevent the larger truth from emerging." Marcus stood, decision made. "This isn't about me anymore. It's about every black soldier whose contribution was minimized or erased. It's about Carter, in that VA hospital being treated for PTSD from operations they claim never happened. It's about Mitchell, who died with no flag on his coffin." He picked up his jacket. "We're going to West Virginia. The cabin's still there." Elijah nodded. "As far as I know, no one's used it in 15 years. "That's where we hid the complete record," Marcus said. "Every mission, every operator, every lie. If they want to erase us, they'll have to erase history itself." "What does it feel like to have your life's greatest achievement systematically erased? To know that your blood and sacrifice were deemed less valuable because of your skin color?" These questions haunted Marcus as he and Elijah drove through the night toward the mountains of West Virginia, where decades earlier they had hidden the true record of their service. The remote cabin was accessible only by a narrow dirt road that wound through dense forest. Time had not been kind to the structure. The roof sagged, windows were boarded, and nature had begun to reclaim the clearing. "Home sweet home," Elijah muttered as they approached cautiously, checking for signs of surveillance or intrusion. Finding none, they entered the musty interior. The cabin had served as an unofficial reunion site for the black operatives in the years following their discharge, a place where they could speak freely about missions that officially never happened. It was here in 1993 that they had agreed to create and preserve an unauthorized record of their service. "Floors still solid," Marcus said, moving to a specific spot and prying up wooden planks to reveal a waterproof container. Inside were documents, photographs, and recorded testimonies that documented 2 decades of classified operations. While Marcus examined the materials, confirming they were intact, Elijah set up a satellite connection on his laptop. "We're trending," he announced. "Your mysterious disappearance after Wilson's revelation has only fueled interest. The Pentagon's denials are backfiring." Marcus barely heard him, lost in memories as he studied a photograph from 1979. It showed a military ceremony where white officers received silver stars for an operation in Southeast Asia. In the background, barely visible, stood Marcus and 2 other black operators who had actually led the mission. They received no recognition that day. "I remember this," Marcus said quietly. "Colonel Phillips told us to consider it an honor just to be on the same field as these real American heroes." Elijah's expression hardened. "Phillips. That racist bastard retired as a 3-star general while Carter can't get proper PTSD treatment." Over the next 2 days, they meticulously organized the evidence and reached out to surviving members of their unit. James Carter, still suffering from PTSD related to unacknowledged combat experiences, agreed to share medical records that referenced classified operations the military claimed never occurred. Thomas Taylor, contacted via secure channels in Sudan, promised to send his preserved documentation. Even as they worked, news continued to break around the controversy. Commander Wilson faced court-martial proceedings for revealing classified information. In a surprising development, his father, retired Navy officer Andrew Wilson, came forward with corroborating stories of a black operative who had saved his unit in Cambodia. "He moved like a shadow," the elder Wilson told reporters from his hospital. "Samadi, we never knew his real name, only the code name, Nighthawk. Without him, I wouldn't be alive and my son wouldn't exist." Media organizations began deeper investigations, uncovering patterns of discrimination in special operations recognition. Veterans from various eras came forward with similar stories of black servicemen whose contributions had been minimized or erased entirely. The Department of Defense issued a carefully worded statement acknowledging historical inequities. while continuing to deny the specific allegations regarding Marcus and his unit. Back at Westridge Manufacturing, plant manager Reed gave multiple interviews portraying himself as Marcus's longtime supporter. "I always knew Marcus was special," he claimed to a local news station. "There was a dignity, a precision to his work that spoke of military discipline. I often told my colleagues that Johnson was no ordinary janitor." When the reporter asked if Reed had known about Marcus's alleged special operations background, Reed hedged, "Well, one doesn't ask about classified matters, does one? But I certainly had my suspicions." This revisionist history made Elijah laugh bitterly when they saw the clip. "Convenient how everyone's your friend now that you might be famous," he remarked. For Marcus, the sudden visibility was deeply uncomfortable. Decades of operating in shadows had conditioned him to avoid attention. When he ventured into the small town near the cabin for supplies, he was recognized by a Vietnam veteran who asked for a handshake. "Whether the government admits it or not," the man said, "those of us who served know the truth when we hear it." As their evidence mounted, government officials made another approach, this time offering Marcus private recognition and a substantial financial settlement in exchange for his silence. "The Secretary of Defense is prepared to acknowledge your contributions in a private ceremony," the official explained over a secure line. "Full benefits, back pay with interest, and a confidential medal presentation. All we ask is your discretion on operational details." Marcus's response was immediate. "This isn't about me anymore. It's about setting the record straight for all of us." The official's tone hardened. "Mr. Johnson, be reasonable. The implications of publicly acknowledging these operations would be far-reaching and potentially damaging to national security." "You mean damaging to the reputations of those who took credit for our work," Marcus countered. After the call, Elijah looked concerned. "They're getting nervous. That means dangerous." Marcus nodded absently, his attention focused on a mission log he'd been reviewing. "Elijah," he said slowly, "look at the orders for the Baghdad mission in '91. Compare them to the intelligence briefing we received beforehand." Elijah studied the documents, his expression darkening. "These don't match. The intelligence clearly indicated heavier resistance than the operational orders accounted for, and the extraction plan was non-existent," Marcus finished. "I always thought it was incompetence, but what if it wasn't?" The implication hung, heavy in the cabin's stale air. "Are you saying the mission was deliberately set up to fail?" Elijah asked. "To eliminate us?" "I'm saying we need to find out," Marcus replied. "Because if that's true, then this isn't just about recognition denied. It's about attempted murder by command. Is it possible that racial discrimination in the military went beyond denied recognition to actual endangerment of black operatives? Comment number 1 if you believe systems of power would go this far to protect their narratives, or number 2 if you think operational failures are more likely due to incompetence than malice. What price would you be willing to pay for truth and justice after decades of silence? Like this video and subscribe to see how Marcus confronts those who tried to erase his existence as he prepares to testify before Congress with evidence that could shake the military establishment to its core. As they continued analyzing the evidence, a disturbing pattern emerged. Missions where black operatives served as team leaders had systematically inadequate support, intelligence, and extraction plans compared to similar operations led by white officers. The Baghdad mission appeared to be the culmination of this pattern, with flaws so obvious in retrospect that they could hardly be accidental. "We need to go public with everything," Marcus decided, "not just about recognition denied, but about how black operators were treated as expendable." Elijah looked troubled. "That's a much bigger accusation, Marcus, one that powerful people will fight even harder to suppress." "Then we better make sure our evidence is irrefutable," Marcus replied, reaching for the secure phone to contact the remaining members of their unit. The truth they were uncovering was far darker than a simple matter of denied medals. It was a systematic devaluation of black lives in service to their country. And Marcus was finally ready to break his silence, regardless of the consequences. The congressional hearing room was packed to capacity, cameras trained on the witness table, where Marcus Johnson sat alone. his posture military straight despite his 67 years. Behind closed doors, he had spent the previous day testifying before the Senate Intelligence Committee about classified operations spanning 2 decades. Now the public portion of the hearing had drawn media attention from around the world. "Mr. Johnson," began Senator Hawkins, chairing the committee, "you've made serious allegations regarding systematic discrimination against black special operators, including yourself. You claim that despite conducting over 70 high-risk missions, you and other black servicemen were denied proper recognition. What evidence can you provide to support these extraordinary claims?" Marcus's voice was steady, the quiet authority he had suppressed for decades, now evident in every measured word. "I have submitted mission logs, photographs, and contemporaneous documentation created by myself and fellow operators precisely because we anticipated this moment. We knew our contributions would be erased." The questioning turned hostile when Senator Radcliffe took his turn. "Mr. Johnson, isn't it more likely that you're an elderly man seeking attention, perhaps confused about the nature of your actual service? The Pentagon has no record of these alleged operations." "With respect, Senator," Marcus replied, "the absence of records is precisely the point. Our missions were designed to be deniable. When they succeeded, others took credit. When they failed, we took the blame. The systematic erasure of black excellence from military history wasn't an oversight, it was policy. Outside the Capitol, hundreds had gathered in support, organized by Darius Williams and fellow Westridge employees. They held signs reading, "Recognition for Nighthawk" and "Black Heroes Matter." The factory workers had staged a walkout after Darius was fired by plant manager Reed for insubordination following his public support of Marcus. News cameras captured the growing crowd as Marcus's testimony continued inside. Back in the hearing room, the committee called former commanding officers to refute Marcus's claims. Colonel Richard Hargrove, now retired, testified confidently, "While I don't doubt Mr. Johnson served honorably in his administrative capacity, these tales of classified operations are pure fantasy. I commanded special operations during the period in question and can state unequivocally that no operator code named Nighthawk existed. When it was Marcus's turn again, he produced the evidence Elijah had helped him prepare. Photographs showing him in locations where America officially had no military presence. Mission logs with handwritten notes from commanders, including Hargrove himself, praising Nighthawk for exceptional service. Voice recordings of debriefings where his actions were discussed in detail, only to be omitted from official reports. "Colonel Hargrove," Marcus said, looking directly at his former commander, "on March 3, 1982, you personally awarded me this unofficial commendation." He held up a faded certificate with Hargrove's signature. "You said it had signed to remain unofficial because, and I quote, Washington isn't ready to admit their best operator is a black man." Hargrove's face flushed with anger or embarrassment. "That document is clearly a forgery." The turning point came when General Thomas Parker requested to address the committee. Parker, a decorated officer nearing retirement, approached the witness table with visible emotion. "I've served this country for 43 years, he began. "And every day of those 43 years, I've known that I owe my life to the man sitting before you today." The room fell silent as Parker recounted a mission in Laos in 1979 when he was a young lieutenant. "Our unit was ambushed. I took shrapnel in both legs. The official report states that Captain William Reynolds carried me 3 miles to extraction under enemy fire. That is a lie." Parker turned to face Marcus. "This man, Marcus Johnson, codenamed Nighthawk, carried me through that jungle. He killed 4 enemy combatants who had us pinned down, treated my wounds, and physically carried me for 7 hours. So until we reached safety. When the medals were awarded, Reynolds received the Silver Star. Nighthawk received nothing." As Parker's testimony concluded, the Department of Defense representatives looked grim. Their strategy shifted visibly, with the Pentagon spokesperson acknowledging Marcus's service, but attempting to minimize its significance. "While we now recognize that Mr. Johnson may have participated in certain classified operations, the scope and importance of his role has been greatly exaggerated. The battle lines were being redrawn. No longer could they deny Marcus existed. Now they sought to diminish his contributions. Outside the capital, the crowd had grown. Plant manager Reed appeared, attempting to position himself as supportive of Marcus, but was shouted down by Westridge workers who knew the truth of his treatment. News cameras captured his hasty retreat. As Marcus left the hearing, escorted by Capitol security, unknown operatives approached him in the parking garage. "This needs to end, Johnson," one said quietly. "Too many reputations and pensions at stake. Walk away now." Before Marcus could respond, Commander Wilson appeared with his own security detail. The operatives retreated, but the message was clear. Powerful forces still wanted this truth buried. That evening, Marcus and his allies gathered at Elijah's Washington apartment to plan their next move. The testimony had made an impact, but the Pentagon was mobilizing its considerable resources to contain the damage. "They're acknowledging just enough to seem reasonable," Elijah observed, while still denying the systematic nature of the discrimination. "We need to go bigger," Darius suggested. The young man had become an unexpected but valuable ally, his social media skills helping to amplify their message. "People are responding to this story. We should hold a public ceremony honoring all the forgotten black operatives, with or without government sanction." Despite government attempts to block the event through permits and legal challenges, the unsanctioned ceremony was organized for the following Sunday at the National Mall. As the day approached, tensions escalated. Counter-protesters began organizing, claiming the recognition of black operators somehow diminished the service of other veterans. Death threats were directed at Marcus alongside thousands of messages of support. The night before the ceremony, Marcus sat alone in his hotel room, reluctantly preparing remarks. Public speaking had never been his strength. He had spent a lifetime avoiding attention rather than seeking it. His phone rang. Commander Wilson. "There's something you should know before tomorrow," Wilson said without preamble. "I've been going through my father's personal records. The officer who took credit for your rescue mission in Cambodia, the one who received the Navy Cross while you got nothing, he's still serving. General Raymond Whitfield, Deputy Director of Special Operations Command." The name hit Marcus like a physical blow. Whitfield had been a constant throughout his career, always appearing at critical junctures, always taking credit, always ensuring Marcus remained in the shadows. "He's mobilizing everything he can to shut down tomorrow's ceremony," Wilson continued. "Security forces, legal injunctions, whatever it takes. He's claiming national security concerns." Marcus thanked Wilson for the warning and hung up. The final piece was falling into place. This wasn't just institutional racism, it was personal. Whitfield had built his entire legendary career on operations that Marcus had actually conducted. If the full truth emerged, decades of honors would be revealed as stolen valor. The next morning, thousands gathered at the National Mall despite light rain. Veterans of all races stood alongside civil rights activists, military families, and ordinary citizens moved by Marcus's story. On a hastily constructed stage, Elijah introduced Marcus to thunderous applause. Before Marcus could speak, a line of security forces approached the stage, led by a senior officer who announced through a bullhorn, "This gathering lacks proper authorization. For security purposes, we must ask you to disperse immediately." The crowd responded with boos and chants of, "Let him speak." Tension escalated as the security forces moved closer to the stage. Cameras broadcast the confrontation live across the nation. In that moment, Marcus Johnson, who had spent a lifetime in shadows, stepped into the spotlight and toward the microphone. What happened next would change the course of military recognition forever. The security forces halted their advance as Marcus stepped forward, perhaps sensing the historical weight of the moment. Thousands of phones captured the scene as an elderly black janitor faced down the military establishment that had erased him. Marcus adjusted the microphone, his hands steady despite the tension crackling through the air. "I never wanted recognition," he began, his voice carrying across the hushed crowd. "I served because I love this country, even when it didn't love me back. I accepted the shadows because that's where I was most effective. But today isn't about me." He gestured to the veterans gathered on stage behind him, both black and white. "It's about truth. It's about acknowledging that courage, sacrifice, and heroism don't belong to any one race. And it's about ensuring that no future soldier is ever denied their rightful place in history because of the color of their skin. The security officer raised his bullhorn again, but fell silent as a new commotion erupted at the edge of the crowd. A formal military honor guard in full-dress uniform was making its way toward the stage, led by General Thomas Parker. The crowd parted to let them through. Parker approached the microphone. "The President has authorized me to escort Marcus Johnson to the Pentagon for an immediate formal recognition of his service. This ceremony will proceed with full military honors." A cheer went up from the crowd, but was quickly silenced as a black SUV sped to the edge of the gathering. General Raymond Whitfield emerged, his face flushed with barely contained fury. "General Parker," he called out, striding forward, "you have no authority to make such arrangements. This entire proceeding is unauthorized and potentially compromises classified information." Parker stood his ground. "The authorization comes directly from the Commander-in-Chief, General Whitfield. Perhaps you'd like to call and confirm." Whitfield pushed past Parker to confront Marcus directly. Despite the decades that had passed, Marcus recognized him immediately. The young captain who had taken credit for the Cambodia rescue, who had built his career on operations Marcus had conducted, who had testified against Marcus after the Baghdad mission failed. "Johnson," Whitfield hissed, low enough that only those nearby could hear, "you're violating every security oath you ever took. This stops now, or I'll make sure you spend whatever years you have left in a federal prison." Marcus met his gaze. Calmly, "It's over, General. The truth is already out there." "Truth?" Whitfield scoffed. "Your word against mine. A janitor versus a decorated general. Who do you think people will believe?" Elijah stepped forward, holding up his phone. "Actually, General Whitfield, you might want to listen to this before you continue." He pressed play and Whitfield's voice filled the suddenly quiet space. "Leave Johnson. He's expendable. The mission matters more than one operator, especially one we can disavow if necessary." It was a recording from the Baghdad mission in 1991, when Whitfield had ordered Marcus's extraction team to abandon him in hostile territory. The color drained from Whitfield's face. "Where did you get that?" "We were trained to document everything," Marcus replied quietly, "because we knew our word wouldn't be enough." More recordings followed. Whitfield taking credit for Marcus's operations. Whitfield explicitly directing that black operators be excluded from mission reports. Whitfield ordering that medals be redirected to white officers under his command. With each damning piece of evidence, Whitfield seemed to physically diminish before the watching crowd. Journalists pushed forward, cameras capturing every moment of the general's unraveling. "You think this changes anything?" Whitfield finally sputtered. "These operations were classified for a reason. You're all compromising national security for, what, hurt feelings? Because you didn't get a piece of metal pinned to your chest?" Marcus shook his head. "No, General. For the truth. For the young black soldiers watching today who need to know their service will be honored equally. For the historical record that tried to erase us." Parker stepped between them, addressing Whitfield. "General, I suggest you return to the Pentagon. Immediately. I believe the Secretary will want to speak with you." As security escorted a visibly shaken Whitfield away, the crowd erupted in cheers. Parker turned to Marcus. "Ready to receive the recognition you earned, Nighthawk?" For the first time in decades, Marcus allowed himself a full smile as he nodded. The ceremony that followed was both solemn and joyous. General Parker presented Marcus with an honorary medal, explaining that the official Medal of Honor would be presented by the President in a formal ceremony once the necessary paperwork was processed. Veterans in the crowd, many in tears, saluted as Marcus finally received acknowledgement of his service. Marcus scanned the audience, spotting Darius with a group of Westridge employees. Among them, looking uncomfortable and out of place, was Plant Manager Reed. Their eyes met briefly, Reed quickly looking away first. As the ceremony concluded, journalists swarmed forward, peppering Marcus with questions about his most dangerous missions, about the system that had erased him, about what came next. Through it all, Marcus maintained the calm dignity that had carried him through decades of invisibility. The only thing I'll say about specific operations is that they were conducted by teams of brave men, many of whom never received proper recognition. Today is a first step toward correcting that injustice. As the crowd gradually dispersed, Commander Wilson approached with his father in a wheelchair. The elder Wilson, frail but determined, extended a trembling hand to Marcus. "You saved my life in Cambodia," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I never got to thank you." Marcus clasped the offered hand between both of his. "No thanks needed, sir. We were all just doing our duty." "The difference," the elder Wilson replied, "is that my duty was acknowledged. Yours was erased. I'm sorry I didn't speak up sooner." Marcus nodded his acceptance of the apology. "You're speaking now. That matters." As the Wilsons moved away, Elijah joined Marcus at the edge of the stage. "So," he said with a hint of his old sarcasm, "how does it feel to exist officially after all these years?" Marcus gazed out at the National Mall, at the monuments to American ideals that had not always included him. "Complicated," he finally answered, "but necessary." In the distance, more reporters were approaching, hungry for the story that was rapidly becoming a national reckoning on race and recognition in America's military. Marcus straightened his shoulders, ready to face them. The invisible man had finally stepped into the light, and the shadows of the past could no longer contain him. 1 month after the dramatic confrontation at the National Mall, Marcus Johnson stood at attention in the East Room of the White House. At 67, his posture remained military perfect as the President of the United States prepared to place the Medal of Honor around his neck. The citation being read aloud detailed operations spanning 2 decades, missions that had officially never happened conducted by a man who had officially never served. For conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of his life above, and beyond the call of duty, the words washed over Marcus as he reflected on the journey that had brought him here. Since the revelation of his service, his life had transformed completely. Westridge Manufacturing had not only rehired Darius Williams with a promotion to supervisor, but had demoted Harrison Reed following the public exposure of his treatment of Marcus. Reed now reported to Darius a poetic justice that gave Marcus quiet satisfaction. The Pentagon had established a commission to review cases of discrimination in military honors, focusing particularly on black and minority service members whose contributions might have been minimized or erased. Already dozens of veterans had come forward with similar stories, their service finally being acknowledged. Commander Wilson, rather than facing court-martial, had received a promotion for his moral courage in bringing the truth to light. The medal ceremony concluded with thunderous applause. Marcus, unused to being the center of attention after decades in the shadows, nodded solemnly to the assembled dignitaries. Later that day, in a more private setting, Marcus met with a group of young black cadets from the service academies. They looked at him with undisguised awe, peppering him with questions about his operations, his training, the mental fortitude required to serve without recognition. The hardest part wasn't the danger, Marcus told them honestly. It was returning home to a country that wouldn't acknowledge what you'd done, that treated you as invisible even after you'd bled for it. You won't have to face that. Your service will be recognized, your achievements celebrated. That's the only reason I agreed to come forward now. One cadet, a young woman with determined eyes, asked, "How did you handle the injustice without becoming bitter?" Marcus considered the question carefully. "I focused on the mission, not the recognition. I found purpose in serving, even when that service went unacknowledged. But that doesn't mean the injustice should have happened, or that we shouldn't correct it now." In the weeks that followed, Marcus found himself adjusting to his new public identity. He had given select interviews, testified before additional congressional committees, and consulted with military historians, eager to correct the record. He had reconnected with family members in Alabama who had never known the truth about his service. Cousins and nieces and nephews who now looked at their quiet relative with new understanding. Yet despite the public attention, Marcus maintained many of his simple habits. He still rose at 5:30 each morning, still did his push-ups, still drank his coffee from the chipped, world's best grandpa mug. He had declined numerous offers for books, movies, and speaking engagements, accepting only invitations to speak at schools and youth organizations where he could share his story with new generations. Perhaps the most meaningful moment came when Marcus donated his Medal of Honor to the Smithsonian National Museum of African American History and Culture. "This doesn't belong to me alone," he explained at the ceremony. "It represents all those who served in silence, whose contributions were erased or diminished. It should be where everyone can see it and remember." Elijah Washington and the other surviving members of their unit had received their own recognition, their service records amended to reflect their actual contributions. For some, like James Carter, this meant improved veterans' benefits and proper treatment for service-related conditions that had previously been denied. The evidence Marcus and his teammates had preserved had proven irrefutable, forcing a systematic review of Special Operations history. General Raymond Whitfield had been forced into early retirement, his legacy forever tarnished by the revelations of his systematic discrimination and credit stealing. Several of his medals had been rescinded, and investigations continued into other aspects of his command decisions. But for Marcus, the most profound change was internal. The duality he had lived with for decades, the warrior forced to pretend he was just a janitor, had finally resolved. He was whole now, his complete story acknowledged, his contributions recognized. On a crisp autumn morning, Marcus returned to his apartment building to find Darius waiting for him. "Got something to show you," the young man said excitedly, leading Marcus to his car. They drove to a community center in one of Baltimore's predominantly black neighborhoods. Inside, a group of veterans spanning multiple generations sat in a circle sharing stories. "Started this group after everything happened with you," Darius explained. "Turns out there are lots of vets, especially older black vets whose service wasn't properly recognized. They're documenting everything, making sure their stories get preserved." Marcus watched the gathering from the doorway, reluctant to interrupt. One elderly veteran was describing how his unit had been among the first to liberate a concentration camp in Germany. But the official photographs and reports had excluded the black soldiers. Another spoke of Vietnam operations, where black soldiers had consistently drawn the most dangerous assignments, but received the fewest commendations. "They want to meet you," Darius said. "You inspired this. Because of you, they're finally telling their stories." Marcus spent the afternoon with the group, listening more than speaking. Before leaving, he promised to help document their experiences, to ensure that their service would not remain in shadows, as his had for so long. On his way out, a teenage boy stopped him, notebook in hand. "Mr. Johnson, I'm doing a school project on unsung heroes. Could I have your autograph?" Marcus signed the notebook, then asked the boy about his interests, his dreams. "I want to serve my country too," the boy said earnestly, "but I want to be seen for who I am and what I contribute." Marcus placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. "Your service should never require invisibility," he told him. "Remember that." In the months that followed, Marcus continued his quiet work, mentoring Darius as the young man developed leadership skills, helping identify other forgotten heroes whose stories deserved recognition, speaking to school groups about both the progress made and the distance still to travel toward true equality. He never returned to janitorial work, instead accepting a consulting position with the Commission reviewing military records for evidence of discrimination. His expertise in identifying redacted or modified reports proved invaluable. One year, after Commander Wilson had first spoken his code name aloud, Marcus stood in the Smithsonian, gazing at his medal in its glass case. Beside it was a photograph of him as a young operator, recently declassified, alongside the false official record that had erased his contribution. The exhibit was titled "Shadows of Valor, the Untold Story of Black Excellence in Special Operations." As he studied his reflection in the glass, Marcus saw both the invisible man he had been forced to become and the hero finally acknowledged by his country. For the first time, those two images aligned into a single, complete identity. Marcus Johnson, Nighthawk, American hero, no longer a ghost but a man fully seen. Have you ever wondered how many other unsung heroes walk among us, their contributions erased or diminished because of who they are? This story of recognition, long denied, reminds us that history is constantly being rewritten as truth emerges from shadow. If Marcus's journey to recognition moved you, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more untold stories of courage and perseverance. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that it's never too late for truth to prevail and justice to be served. What other forgotten heroes deserve to have their stories told? Let us know in the comments below. Thank you for witnessing Marcus Johnson's extraordinary journey from invisibility to honor. Marcus Johnson's story teaches us that truth cannot remain buried forever, no matter how powerful the forces trying to suppress it. His journey from invisibility to recognition highlights how systemic racism created two Americas, one where heroism was celebrated and another where equal sacrifice was deliberately erased. The military's treatment of black operators reveals how institutions can use secrecy and classification to perpetuate discrimination while maintaining plausible deniability. The courage displayed wasn't just on the battlefield, but in the decades that followed, the quiet dignity of continuing to serve a country that refused to acknowledge that service. Marcus and his fellow operators demonstrate that true heroism often lies in perseverance when recognition is withheld. We also learn that justice delayed is not necessarily justice denied. The allies who helped Marcus, from Commander Wilson, who risked his career, to Darius, who stood by him despite personal cost, remind us that allyship requires action and sacrifice, not just sympathy. Perhaps most importantly, Marcus teaches us that we must document our truths, preserve evidence of our contributions, and refuse to let others control our narratives. For every Marcus Johnson whose story eventually emerged, countless others remain in shadows, their achievements erased from history simply because of the color of their skin. Has this story of long-denied recognition made you think about other forgotten heroes in your own community? People whose contributions were minimized because of their race? Share their stories in the comments below. Let's bring more hidden heroes into the light they deserve. If you believe that historical injustice should be corrected, no matter how much time has passed, hit that like button to stand with Marcus and countless others who served in shadows. Subscribe to our channel for more untold stories of courage, resilience, and triumph against systemic racism. These narratives aren't just history, they're urgent lessons for creating a more just future. Share this video with someone who needs to understand that America's greatness has always been built on contributions that official records tried to erase. Remember Marcus's powerful words: "Your service should never require invisibility." Thank you for bearing witness to this journey from erasure to honor. In recognizing these truths, we take one small step toward the country we aspire to, where valor is honored regardless of the color of the hero's skin.